Welcome to episode 531 of the Man That Can Project podcast. Today is a very, very exciting. I'm sure a lot of people listening, if you're driving, please pull over to really take away the messages that will be coming from this. And I will guarantee you'll be sharing this with people that you care about because you'll want them to help. Want to help them maximize their life. Today we have Chadwick on the show. Chad, welcome.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
So just to give people some context, the beautiful thing that I love about social media, a lot of people talk about the negative sides of social media. For me, when you use it well, as with anything, there's a lot of great that can come from it. And I use social media to connect with people that inspire me, have the ability to shift my perspective and really help me maximize my life. And one day your video popped up as a reel and you were sharing your story on what is going on in your life and what you're about to document. And dude, you had me in tears. And I know that wasn't your intention, but your intention, which you'll talk about soon, is really helping people get the most out of their life based off the experiences that you are having. And so with that, I was like, all right, I've got to get this dude on the podcast. Let's hope he's open to it. And another thing, as people are about to learn, your time is extremely valuable. So for you to be sitting here on the other side, I truly appreciate you giving me some of your valuable time because you could be doing anything else in the world, but I know this aligns with part of your mission as well. But Chad, to start it off, I would love you to finish this sentence. I am a man that can.
Yeah, I'm gonna shift it just a little bit. I'm gonna say I'm a man that does. So I'll finish it this way. I'm a man that does what he said he's gonna do. That's it. I'm a man that does what he says he's going to do.
That's beautiful. Very clear, very concise. But let's kick it into what you said you're going to do. So when I stumbled across that first video, you were going to document the beginning of the potential end of your life or the beginning of something beautiful.
Yeah.
Can you share with our audience what's going on in your life currently, and we'll flow from there?
Yeah. In July of 2022, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Tumor in my lung was 5 times the average, had 30 lesions in my brain, cancer in the lymph nodes, in my vertebrae, and bones. Quite the wake-up call. And they told me that if the medication, you have 6 to 12 months if the medication doesn't work. If it does work, right, it could work for like 10 years. Cool. Or it could work for 6 months. Oh, right. But the average is only a year and a half. And so that was, that's what we call the ultimate pattern interrupt in life. The easiest way for me to explain that feeling is imagine anybody who drives stick. If you're an American, you probably aren't driving stick because most don't drive it. But just imagine driving a car in third gear down a highway at 100 miles per hour. Third gear at 100 miles per hour is not good for the engine. And so that's kind of what was happening in a way. And then all of a sudden cancer was like somebody came, reached up, grabbed that emergency brake, that e-brake, pulled it as hard as they could at 100 miles an hour. And when you do that, you fishtail and then you flip. And that's what it felt like. So, and we're 15 months now past that. So I've made it past 12 months, which is good. But there's a lot of things that have changed, and I'm sure we'll get into it.
What was it like? Can we go back to that initial diagnosis? How did you receive that? Like, you talk about this pattern interrupt, and when I think about pattern interrupts, especially for a lot of people, and even in my own life, it's like generally a rock bottom moment. And I think similar to what you're trying to achieve is, and similar to what I'm trying to achieve is, I don't want people to have these rock bottom moments to really create a beautiful life. And so for you, I guess, can you talk through what that moment was like when you received the news?
I mean, yeah, frankly, excuse my language here, but I said, fuck this. Like, there's no way. There's no way, right? Because sure, I wasn't like perfectly metabolically elite, right? Yeah, I eat, peanut butter covered pretzels or something like that, and bags of mangoes, but like I was also pretty fit still, right? I could run a couple miles easy, surf a lot. And I'm like, there's no way that this is real. And they say, especially for lung cancer, that those who are more fit usually don't catch it until late stages because the symptoms are so small. And so like, I was like So basically being mostly in shape, right, is the main reason why I couldn't find this early enough. And so like at the beginning when I was just like, fuck this is not happening. It's that stage of denial, you know?
Mm.
And then I went into straight depression and fear and anxiety. Like I literally sat there and it's like an immediate, it is the fastest jolt in your life to reflect on the last X amount of years. I was diagnosed at 39. I was the youngest patient for my oncologist by 20 years. Okay. So like I'm looking at my last 39 years going, what the fuck did I even do? And now it's over. It's over. It's going to be done. Yeah. That's how I started reacting to it. That was the initial reaction.
So, okay, that's a huge wake-up call for a lot of people. So 39 years, what were you doing? What had you been building to in the lead up to that to turn around and go, what have I actually fucking done?
Yeah. So sorry. So F-bombs are cool?
Yeah, man, we're good. We're good to go.
Okay. All right, good. Sometimes I forget to think about that or ask it. Obviously a lot of reflection happens. And the summary of this is I had this vision for my life. Actually, when I got back from Australia, I lived in Australia 5 months going to school at Bond University. I rode my push bike, because you Aussies like to call it push bikes, from Bond all the way to Sydney, right? So it took me 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah, every Aussie's like, what?
Yeah, why?
Because I wanted to do something different. And there was a bunch of Americans at my school, and they're like, let's fly to Sydney. And I was like, nah, I'm going to ride a bike. And they're like, no, you're not. And I was like, well, now I fucking am. So I did. But on that bike ride, right? On that bike ride, I learned a ton. I mean, it was 2 weeks. For those who don't know, it's like the equivalent of going from Cleveland to Washington, D.C., back to Cleveland and like down to Columbus or something. And I learned a ton about just the world. And when I say that, there's 2 incidences there, right? Where it was like, one, I rolled up to this town. I can't remember where it was. It's on the beach. And I sat down on a bench. A guy came up to me and sat down. He's like, oh, where are you riding to? I said, to Sydney. And he goes, wait, you're an American? I go, yeah. He goes, I fucking hate Americans. And I go, and that's my first experience with somebody who doesn't like America. And most Aussies love Americans, but this case, it was different, right? His daughter was killed by a drunk driver by a senator's son or some high up politician. And obviously the kid got out of it with no repercussions, right? So there was this sense of angst. And I was like, that was my first experience of, oh my God, not everybody loves America. And this is before the internet, right? So this is not before the internet, but before it became prevalent with all this. And then the second experience is I was riding from a small beach town to another beach town, but this time I took the intercoastal road thinking I'll just ride it. Well, I wrecked on the bike, came off of it, broke some things. I was all ripped up. And then I was like, all right, I'll just ride it the rest of the way. Well, I didn't know for 3 hours it was basically going to be a sand road. And so I literally walked this thing. And I saw 3 cars total. And I finally get to pavement again, and it's a small little town. And this guy rolls up in a pickup truck, and he goes, hey man, what are you doing? I go, I'm riding to Sydney. He's like, from where? Like from Brisbane. He was like, what the fuck, right? And he's like, that's awesome. He's like, about 6 houses up on the left is my house. I don't know how long. It was like a mile. He's like, I'll have orange juice and a sandwich ready for you. Mind you, he's got a pickup truck. And so I was like, okay, can I just throw my bike in the back and like ride there? And he goes, no, man, you got to finish this shit. I was like, all right. But I sat down on his porch for 2-3 hours and we just talked about life. And I said, dude, the world is, everybody's the same, even though we're all different. And that's what kind of triggered me to say, I just want to be a world traveler that exposes everybody, specifically Americans, to the rest of the world. That's what I wanted. But when I got out of school, this is what I said. Well, first, I'm going to become a millionaire in real estate. Completely different. And I was actually on that path in 2005, 6, 7. And I started making really good money. I sold 10 million in real estate. And I don't know if anybody remembers 2008, but the world came crashing down and I lost everything. I went bankrupt, right? And then it just proceeded to be startups and things that failed and me trying things. But all of them were outside of the authentic Chad, or Chadwick in this case, since I wrote it up here, right? And that was the beginning where when I got diagnosed, I literally reflected on that timeline. And I said, dude, I have been so inauthentic to myself. It's not even funny. And that, what I call inauthenticity stress, was essentially the beginning of the downfall. And I can get into that more, but I'm going to pause there because I just talked about it.
Dude, I took so much away from that because I feel like that's where I'm at in my life right now. Because once again, for me previously, it was wanting to be a professional athlete. And then when that doesn't quite work out how you want it to be, you have these goals and aspirations. And one thing that I love doing is just challenging myself physically. Like, I just love the idea of seeing what my body's capable of, competing while my body still can. But then there's this other element that I get pulled into, well, the business life. You need to earn money. You need to think about the future, which also pulls you away from the present to a degree, because it's like, when's enough enough? And that's a question that, all the goalposts for me continue to change when I hit one milestone. And I look back, and I'm very fortunate. I'm surrounded by, my wife's a musician, and so we hang around a lot of creative people, and they're very wonderful at being present. And it just, I get so frustrated at myself that I can't do that. But then listening to what you're saying, I'm like, dude, this is going to be me. Whether I get diagnosed with an illness or I just reach the end of my life, I'm going to look back and go, what the fuck was I doing, man? Like, really, all the things that I thought mattered, did they really matter? And the perfect example. So what do you think, why didn't you be your authentic Chadwick back then? Why did you get pulled into this building an empire kind of life?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane to think back, because while I was selling real estate, I had this. All my clients knew that I shouldn't be selling real estate. They all knew it. They actually told me. I sold 10 million in real estate, had plenty of clients, and they're like, one client literally said, "We got to buy a house soon because Chad's going to be off somewhere in the world, and we won't be able to buy this house without." It was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke. I had a second client that literally introduced me to somebody at Nat Geo in Chicago and was like, "Hey, go talk to this person." And that person goes, "I can probably get you a gig being the assistant to a Nat Geo photographer." Pretty sweet gig. And he's like, "It's going to pay like $25,000-$30,000. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I just sold 10 million in real estate." Yeah, right. I'm going to go make so much money, And so I was like, I'm just going to go build Nat Geo. I'm going to make so much money in real estate that I'll just build Nat Geo. But let's just say I made a shit ton in real estate, right? Let's say I made 10 million in real estate. I was so focused on 10 million in real estate that when would I ever build Nat Geo? Because I'm so focused on keeping up the income flow from real estate. That's a full-time, that's a lifetime gig, right? So it was not ironic, but it was just naive to think that I could go and make 10 million from real estate and then go build Nat Geo. Like, all right, I made it. Now I'm going to switch. And for X amount of years, I'd be inauthentic to myself until I got there without the guarantee that I get there. And here we are. I never got there. So I look back at that moment as like, oh shit, that was the fork in the road where I made a decision. Now, I don't regret it in a way, which we can talk about later, but
it's definitely that if-then idea. It's like, or when-then almost, where many people say it, and I know a lot of men say it, and I was guilty in the beginning of my relationship. It's like, when I earn this amount of money, then I'll spend more time with my wife.
Yeah.
And I would always be able to justify why I would work late in the office or why I would work weekends and miss events, miss just even coffee together in the morning, because I needed to earn that amount of money and then I'd do it. But the challenge is, as you just stated, is like, if you're not making time for those things now, it's only going to become harder when you have more responsibility and more income, because you've got people dependent on you or whatever it may be. So it's about carving out the time now.
That's it. Humans we're so sophisticated cognitively, right? Like, our neocortex is super sophisticated, and we can think about the past and we can think about the future, meaning we think about a past event and then we can project that event into the future, even though it's never happened, and we can feel those thoughts. That's a psychoneuroimmunology, right? Where Your thoughts trigger chemicals to produce a feeling that matches that thought. So we'll think about the past, a good thing or a bad thing, but most of the time it's a bad thing. I'd say 80% of the time it's a bad thing. And then what you do is like, because of that, sorry, I keep putting my hand out here as if you can see.
That's so good.
Over here. So here's the past, right? And you'll project that into the future. And we never live right here. Never. Or rarely ever. And I think that's the thing that's everybody's trying to get to, is how do I live in the present every single day? You know.
Do you
Don't
feel
get me wrong. Go ahead.
Do you feel you've been able to do that now since the diagnosis, or is that something you're still trying to achieve?
I'm getting better at it, right? I'm getting better at it. I'm definitely getting better at it. Like, I literally am just focused on today. Don't get me wrong. I have to think. I'm doing a premiere for this TV show that we filmed in India, and its premiere is coming up in 4 weeks. I got to prepare for that, right? I got to build some stuff, got to do some things. So I got to think ahead to do it and like put the task list together. But now it's just, what am I doing today? This is it. And the thing that I'm trying to do is, how do I live my authentic self down to my very last breath, whether it's 18 months or 60 years, right? And that's all I think about every day. And that's how I try to do it. I'm trying to answer the question. Like, I'm getting better, but it's not easy. I work on my mind 2.5 hours per day, and that's the only reason why I can actually live more presently.
Can we talk about that? Because I know one of your goals is to become metabolically, physically, and mentally elite. And you've got there, for those who are watching on YouTube, becoming elite is something that you're focused on. Within the 2.5 hours a day that you're spending on your mindset, firstly, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Secondly, how is that impacting you?
I'm gonna add a zero. So we'll do the zero, the context, then the 1 and the 2. So
perfect.
Here's the clickbait. Here's the clickbait headline. My thoughts gave me cancer. Okay, that's a clickbait headline. If you think about it, though, if you look at some of the science, right, you'll see how this works. Like I said, psychoneuroimmunology is the idea that your thoughts, it's not the idea, it's the science that a thought will produce a chemical reaction. So if you think positively about something, you create dopamine and serotonin. Those are the mood elevation. On the flip side, when you have negative thoughts, anger, resentment, bitterness, right, you will create things like adrenaline, cortisol, and other chemicals that suppress the immune system and everything else. Basically, adrenaline and cortisol are designed for fight and flight, right? It's a stress response. Back in the day, we'd be chased by, I don't know, lions, tigers, bears, whatever, right? Or the tribe next door, we can't find food. That's a stress response. It's designed to be that way. But the world is different now. Our stresses are mortgage and cars and pets and things like that. And like I said earlier, the neocortex is so sophisticated that we can think a thought about something in the past and bring up the chemicals as if it's happening today, even though it's not. Perfect example is this. When I filed bankruptcy in 2010, I could seriously look back at that and think and relive that experience, and I can feel that experience, the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt. And so what happens is when you think about those things, and I would put that in my body would go into the adrenaline, cortisol, fight or flight. And that's what would create a new homeostasis. Homeostasis is where your body is in a perfectly chemically balanced state. Your respiration, your glucose, your heart rate, everything's perfect. The problem with it, chronic stress, right, elevates that baseline. So now, like, instead of at the baseline of 0, let's say you've elevated to 4. And what happened was I was living in that 4 state, like that elevated homeostasis state, for years. And what happens is when you're out of homeostasis and that stress response is kicking in all those chemicals, you essentially, right, turn the immune system off from cellular repair, catching diseases, all that stuff, and finding tumor cells. Everybody has tumor cells, by the way. Everybody has cancer cells. Your immune system is what's getting it. But if the immune system has to always be in fight or flight, because that's where I'm sitting, and trying to repair, it can't do both well at the same time. And all of a sudden, you're trying to build your life in a tornado-like environment. Okay? That's essentially what I was doing for years. Okay? I'm embarrassed sometimes to even say it, but I have no time for embarrassment anymore. So it's like, who gives a shit? That's why I'm also doing podcasts like this, right? Because I just want to get this out. So that's the context. That's the context. So the first question then you asked is like, well, what am I doing, right? Like, what am I doing?
Yes.
So if all the thoughts that I have are here's a better, one more context piece. We have 70,000 thoughts per day. Think about this, 70,000 thoughts per day. 95% are the same as yesterday. Shit ain't changing if 95% are the same as yesterday. And I always ask people, what percentage do you think is negative? And I get a range, 60, 70, 90, right? It all depends on the individual. But we can roughly say 80% negative. And I do this exercise when I do this training. I say, okay, shout out some thoughts you're having right now. And literally, right on cue, 8 of the 10 are negative. So what I needed to do is like, I needed to break the shitty patterns in my head. Because what I need to do is I need to break the neural nets in order to have the good thoughts to produce the better chemicals. And so I will sit down. I'll sit in this chair right here, and I'll shut my body down. So there's 4 steps, right? I call it mental work. Some people will call this meditation, but it's not like using the Calm app going, right? So there's 4 brainwave states. Beta, alpha, theta, delta. Delta is sleep, so we can just take that one out. Beta is what you and I are doing, talking back and forth. And sometimes beta gets super high, right? Meaning you're stressed. That's high beta. Alpha is like where you're kind of sitting, relaxed, taking it in. You know, so if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably just in an alpha state listening. And then theta is the magic zone for me, right? And for many. Theta is that moment right before you fall asleep, where your body is shut off, but your mind is still there. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right? And so in that moment, remember psychoneuroimmunology, where the thoughts produce chemicals. But if your body is shut off, chemicals aren't produced, but your mind is still there. So I get into this Theta State. I'm sitting at this desk, and I'll slowly lower it down. And anybody who's ever done a meditation knows that it's like bing, bong, bing, bong. You know, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But eventually, like, I get to a place where I'm like, I slowed it down, and I can feel the body go limp, right? And I'll like, actually, my neck will sometimes fall. And I'm like, okay, my body's shut off, but my mind's very aware. And so if anybody's ever seen Star Wars, you know, it's got that script that goes at the beginning.
Yeah.
Long time ago, or whatever the hell it says. That's what happens. Now I'm literally, my mind can look at all the thoughts. That's called thinking about thinking, metacognition. So now I'm thinking about the thoughts. And in that script, I'm identifying the thoughts that don't serve me. And it takes work. That's why I call it mental work. Right? And so here's an example of one early on. I can't remember how I phrased it, but it was, I'm not where I need to be, or I'm not where I thought I'd be, right? When anytime you think that, what feelings do we think we create? I'm not where I want to be. What do we feel?
Anxiety.
Depression.
Yeah.
So I realized
awareness.
all that shit. And so like, as I was sitting there, I was like, oh my God, this has been subconscious in my mind. I didn't even know it was happening. So I had to say, well, what's the opposite? And I say opposite, but sometimes it's not perfectly opposite. And I was like, well, I'm exactly where I need to be. So once I flip that thought, right, I start to say it, and I say it like 100 times over and over because you don't really believe it at first. Like, I'm right where I need to be. I have stage 4 lung cancer. That's not exactly what I fucking want to think about. And so now I'm like, I'm exactly where I need to be. I repeat it 100 times, and all of a sudden my body starts to feel it. You say it enough times, the chemical will be produced. And so as soon as it triggers, and I can feel the trigger change, I can feel it, all of a sudden I start bringing it back up. So when I get out of that state and I come back to beta, I now have a new thought pattern that is associated with a feeling. So now the chemicals of dopamine and serotonin are being produced versus the negative stuff. So that's how I do it, right? It takes a lot of work, hence the name mental work. I do it in the morning right when I wake up. I do it I'd go on a walk and do it for an hour and 15 minutes, right? And then at night when I go to sleep, I do it for upwards of an hour and a half. And people are like,
Wow.
how do you have time for that? I go, I have to fucking have time for it, you know? Anyway, so that's how I do it. The result, what you're experiencing right now with my energy level, 4 months ago it was non-existent. I was depressed. I was anxious, right? And now I'm kind of like, I'm back to what they used to call me, Charger Chad. That was my nickname, Charger Chad.
Charger Chad. Love it.
Yeah. So that's, look, I'm in the best place. I still have 9 lesions in my brain. I still have a lung tumor. I have all these things. But for some reason, I stopped giving a shit and I'm just going to go live. And it's all because of that mental work.
And that's I think it's such a powerful point to touch on. So hearing your story, I'm like, it makes all of the problems that, all the things that I stress about just seem really insignificant. And I understand that every individual, we all have our own challenges, and they are the biggest challenge that we're dealing with, right? So it has significance. But understanding you're making time, you're prioritizing time to work on your mindset when so many people neglect that. It's, I remember back in the day, I used to listen to a lot of like emo music and punk music and stuff like that, which I loved. But I understood when I started working on my mind, because I wake up every day and I go to bed the night before wanting to have the best possible day the next day, the best outcomes, as we all do, get up at 5 a.m. or whatever time I choose to get up, do what I need to do. But when you wake up, that alarm goes off and you're like, shit, I don't know, I could lay back in. I'll even find myself just sitting on my side for 3 minutes having this conversation with myself. Do I get out or do I just snooze? The snooze would be all right. But anyway, you get yourself through that alarm and you get on with your day because of the mental prep. But when I'm getting out, the first thing that I do, much like what you said, Chadwick, is I prime my mind. I'm not happy and motivated every morning. I'm like, fuck, I want to go back to bed, man. I want to, stay in bed with my missus for another 40 minutes. Geez, that'd be nice. But I also know on the other side of that is the life that I want to live. Like, I love being active. I love getting up early. I love learning. I'm very curious about people like yourself or people's lives. And that first couple of hours in the morning is when I get to do that. It shapes my day. Because if I don't do that, I'm like tumbleweed on a dirt road, man. I'm just getting blown wherever the wind takes me. And as you've mentioned, it's like we don't know when our time's up. And we all have the ability to design our life. It's not easy. There are things that you will do, people that you'll surround yourself with that maybe take you on a bit of a detour. But when you understand why you're here, as Chad, the detour you went on, and probably one that I'm actually on at the moment, is like you're creating something that maybe is a little bit further away from your authentic self than you believe. I do believe I'm lucky because I work in the coaching space, so I get to do the shit that I'm doing every day anyway, and talk to cool people and all of that. But for those who are listening, what do you want to look back and reflect on and go, man, that's what I should have been doing? What mindset do you need to develop to do that shit? It takes time. You said 2.5 hours a day. That's insane. Like, to me, that's even insane. But I can appreciate and respect why you do that. And what I love is the adversity that you're dealing with. I could not even comprehend. Like, I can sit here and say, yeah, man, I would do this and this is how I'd respond to that. But I don't fucking know. I have no idea.
Who knows? The hope is you never have to find out, right?
Correct. But the learning for me and the takeaway for that is you have to do the work on the mindset to be able to get the life that you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's so funny when I was playing soccer in high school and college. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's 98% mental," and I'm like, "Okay, cool. I don't know what that means." And now I'm like, "Fuck, it's actually probably 99.8% mental." Right?
Yeah.
If your thoughts have that power on the chemical production, right? If your thoughts have that much power on chemical production, mine was just cancer, but that could lead to other things. If you overwork it, it can lead to hypertension or diabetes, whatever, right? The chronic stress is the problem. And don't get me wrong, I look back and I'm just like, dude, I wish I wasn't in this place. Right? But that's one of those thoughts. I wish I wasn't in this place. Because when I wish I wasn't in this place, it's going to produce anxiety, depression, fear. And so the thought that I had recently, one of the epiphanies and one of the changes that I've had that actually is probably the main reason I'm even being this functional right now. For my wife, it's like, oh my God, I haven't seen this version of you in 15 months. Right? The one I had a couple weeks ago, and I recognized it. It had been happening, but I didn't know it until I sat down and I did the observation. It was simply, I've wasted my chance, my one chance at this life. I've wasted my one chance at this life. And I realized that even that subconscious thought, because it's so automatic, you don't realize it's there. That thing was bringing the chemical production of depression, anxiety, etc. And so when I saw it, I changed it. And it took me a while to feel it. Remember, your body's like, what the fuck is this new thought? And it was simply, I was born for this shit. Now, I don't know how long I'll live, 18 months to 60 years. But the point is now I sit here, I'm like, I was born for this. Do I want to be born for this? Not really, right? But when I sit there and I actually think it and I actually believe it and actually feel it, the energy goes through the roof. And energy is what changes cellular makeup. And the hope is that energy change, because my body has the medication to fix this. The question is, will it be enough? And will I be able to access it? The key is the energy component. How do I stimulate the cellular makeup to get the NK cells, the T cells, all those things to actually recognize the cancer cells and take it out? And so looking back, it's kind of like, it's wild to think that this experience, weird to say, but I was born for this. Because my hope is that whatever I learn, regardless of the time I have left, I can help people either improve their performance and what they're doing because they're already in a good spot, or help them recognize before they get to the point where it becomes a forced pattern interrupt.
What was the process that you went through to recognize what your authentic self was?
I went back to college and I said, what did I really want? And again, it was that Australia experience that changed everything for me, right? Riding that bike from Brisbane to Sydney. I was just like, I was like, that's all I want to be doing. And so I went back and said, what did you want to do? And I was like, well, I wanted to do this. Okay, so why aren't you doing it? Now, don't get me wrong, right? I think follow your passion is some of the worst advice out there, because like I'm passionate about surfing, but I'm not going to go follow my passion and become like a surf coach. I'm just not going to do it, right? Because you don't know, you got to pay bills and make a living. Yeah. If I were to look back and say, well, what would you have done differently? It's funny because now I'm actually like, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't do anything differently. But for somebody who's in a place, I'm now gifted with this. I consider this pattern interrupted gift. Okay, so I'm now gifted with this. But if you're at a point where something is going crazy, the way I look at it is, are you in a hamster wheel or are you in a maze? Are you in a hamster wheel or are you in a maze? Because here's the difference. Have you ever done a corn maze by any chance? You're in the Midwest now. Have you ever done a corn maze?
Yeah, no, I haven't yet, but maybe I will after this.
They're so epic. They're so epic.
The corn maze.
Yeah. Look up in Tennessee. They should have a few. If not, just drive to Ohio or Iowa or something. But my point is, they're epic because as a kid, you're running through a maze and it's super fun. But when you go through a maze or you do a maze, you bounce off walls. You're like, oh, that's a wrong turn. Oh, and that can be frustrating in many ways. But a maze is fun, and more importantly, there's always an out. The question is will you get out of the maze before you die? Maybe, maybe not, right? But the point is, the maze is always fun. But a hamster wheel, that's not fun. Anytime we say the word hamster wheel, everybody cringes, like, oh, I don't want to be on a hamster wheel. So the question is, are you on a hamster wheel or are you in a maze? If you're on a hamster wheel, you need a stick in the spoke. I was given a forced stick in my spoke. That was cancer. But you can put a stick in your own spoke. So step one, figure out if you're in a hamster wheel or in a maze. That's it. If you're in a maze, you're golden. That means you're happy 80% of the time. You can only be happy 80% of the time because there's still taxes to pay and dumb shit like that, right? So it is what it is. So maze or hamster wheel, step number one. If you find out, if you're in a maze and you're just bouncing off walls, fine, you're good. Just keep bouncing off walls, figuring shit out. But if you're in a hamster wheel and you recognize you're in a hamster wheel, you gotta pattern interrupt it. And that could be anything. I like to do unguided travel. That's what Uncharted Spirits is. That's what our TV show is about. Other people like to go on, do arduous things like an Ironman or something. I don't know. But the point is once you get the pattern interrupt, things will change. And sometimes changes suck, right? Like maybe the house you live in and the cars you have, you shouldn't have because they're actually keeping you from the things you should have been doing. I don't know. It's not easy, but it's way more rewarding.
And that probably comes back to you taking time to think about what it is. People live such busy lives now where they don't ever stop and think about, is this what I want, or what is continuing to do this thing costing me? Because every decision we make costs us something.
Totally.
And we need to get clear on what, I guess what those opportunity costs are and what we are going to look back with fond memories. It's like when you go traveling, obviously you said you do a lot of unguided travel. I'm sure, even from my experiences, the stuff that you talk about and you laugh about a couple of months later or years later is all the shit that went wrong. It's not the most incredible, trip where you fly business class and then you get chauffeured to this lovely hotel where they have croissants waiting for you. Don't talk about that. That's cool for Instagram. But then you forget about that because there's nothing to interrupt the flow state that you wanted to be in.
Dude, you nailed it. That's actually exactly it, right? It's the discomfort. I mean, the TV show we created called Supply Run, it is designed to go wrong. Because there's a quote in a book. I can't remember the book. I'll have to find it. But monotony, right? Basically, the idea of monotony collapses time. It collapses time. So you go into the office every day or you're on the Zoom every day, right? And you just do the same thing. All of a sudden, the 10 years felt like a year. Like, where the fuck did time go? And everybody's like, what have I been doing? But novelty expands it, right? We did this trip in the Himalayas, right? It was 22 days. It felt like a freaking lifetime because things were so new to us. We're like, what is happening? We're on day 2. It feels like we're like a month in. And it's purely because of the novelty of the things going wrong. Nothing was planned other than point A, point B. Let's figure it out along the way. It's the novelty that actually makes your life feel expansive.
That's one of the challenges I have, especially with focusing on, I think a lot of the work that I'm doing now on myself is because I want to learn to be more present, be able to live in the moment. But I also am so programmed to think about where my life's going to be in 10 years' time. And I think it's important to have a bit of both because you don't want to just live so much in the present that the future coming your way is terrible. People do that with alcohol, drugs, or certain other ways that they live their life. But there's this sort of juggling act that needs to happen where you do sit down and think about, okay, well, how can I maximize the most out of this day and make sure that it's not similar to yesterday or tomorrow, but also consistency and repetition is what delivers certain results as well. So I guess even speaking out loud now, part of what can help you live an incredible life is having consistently random or challenging experiences in your life.
Yeah. I mean, designing some discomfort. And it's not like, oh, let me go cut my hand. We're not talking about It's like, don't put yourself in stupid situations, right?
Yeah.
It's controlled chaos is what we're looking for, right? We're looking for ways to plan the experience that forces just a different way. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was that? How did you phrase that again?
Where I was talking about having this juggling act between building, or even for you, I guess, living in the future because you don't necessarily, and all of us don't necessarily know how long we're going to be here. We want to make sure that the life that we are creating for ourselves is one that we want to be part of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like, how do you plan for the future? I couldn't even plan for the future 9 months ago, 6 months, 4 months ago. I couldn't even plan for the future. I was like, what's the fucking point of planning? Like, why even try? But I still have these things where you've heard the name BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goals. I still have them. And it's really simple. It is build this TV show called Supply Run in this Uncharted Spirits company. I want to surf Mavericks. I want to be a drummer in front of 1,000 people. I've never drummed in my life, but I have it there.
Sick. Yeah.
I air drum and I get the concepts. And then it's like, go to Mars. Okay. Mars, Mavericks, that's probably less than a 1% chance, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to try anyway. And so I still have these big, hairy, audacious goals for something to go towards. But in the micro day to day, I can only plan out 18 months for myself now at best. And so it's like, cool, I have an 18-month plan or a year plan, and that's how I'm operating from here on out, because you cannot predict what's going to come. This place that we have, this house that you see here, we bought it with a 3-year plan. The plan was to remodel it, which we did. That was phase 1. Phase 2 was start to build the lot, because it's a half-acre land in California on the ocean. It's kind of unheard of. It's a unique lot. So we were going to build this thing called Tequila Farm. And then we were getting into phase 3 of the house renovation. Well, we're in the middle of phase 2 building out Tequila Farm, and then I get cancer. Well, that throws everything off. So the 3-year plan didn't even matter. So it's 12 to 18 months is best. Just plan for 12 to 18 months. Know your big, hairy, audacious goals are there. My wife and I have this thing called the North Star. Are we both looking at the North Star? That's all that matters. And what is the North Star? So having a definition of what the North Star is, the path in which you get there can be different and can change. Anybody who's been a hiker, off-trail hiker knows that you go one way and then you're like, oh shit, that's not working. You got to go the other way. But you're still getting to the same destination. It's just different. So know your North Star, know where you're hiking to, but be ready for the trails to change.
Yeah. And once again, as you've said a number of times, the challenges and the rerouting is something that you've got to learn to deal with, because that's part of life. A lot of people,
that's the fun
especially, it is the fun part, but a lot of people are still struggling to accept the situation. It's like, can I sit here and complain about it, which is the easy option, or do I press reroute and just get to work moving towards the life that I want to create for myself? And once again, it's easy to sit here and say that, but I guess the example that you gave with you're doing 2.5 hours of that mental work to be able to get yourself ready for the day. Depending on what's going on in an individual's life, that probably determines how much time we need to prep ourselves for how we want to show up and, I guess the results that we want to achieve. It's much like, I guess, you creating your TV show as opposed to me trying to create a TV show. You've got a lot more experience, so you could do it in probably 1/100th of the time that I could, because I wouldn't even know which camera to start with or how to, design a script, etc. And that's what I feel a lot of people struggle to make, or potentially a lot of people just aren't aware that your starting point is very different to the person next to you.
Totally. Everything changes for everybody, right? You said something a moment ago, and I sometimes overthink and forget where I was going with these things.
That's all right.
Yeah. There was something you said. Yeah.
I wish I could just replay myself, but
it was like a good thing, but I'll come back. I'm sure I'll come back to it. But man, it's gonna annoy me. But yeah. Anyway,
I was gonna ask anyway, and then obviously if that thought comes back. But how has it been on your relationship with your wife? Obviously having her support, but how has it I guess she's on that journey with you. So how's she been throughout that experience?
Yeah, I just thought that I got the thought. So pause on that one. Here's the thought. So what happens is with people in life, right? Shit comes up. And if you're not prepared mentally, you're gonna react in a wrong way. The perfect example of that was I've been doing this mental work for 9 months or 3 months, 90 days. And then I had to do scans. Scans sucks. Anybody who's had anything to do with scans knows that there's this thing called scanxiety. And so scanxiety was kicking in hard, right? And I'm sitting there going, dude, you've done the work, use it. So I get 2 scans every time. I get a brain MRI to see where the lesions in my brain are looking like. And then the second one is a PET scan, which is the full body scan. And I got the scans done. And of course, The brain MRI comes back within a few hours. You sit there and wait, and I see it before even the doctor does, so I get to interpret it, which is super fun. That was a joke, but anyway. So my point is, I got the brain MRI back, and I saw increased size in 5 of the 9 lesions. Okay, increased size. That's an immediate, like, the body and the mind goes into, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, it's over, right? Or things are going to go south. What did I do? I said, dude, your mind, you've been working on your mind. Let's go fix the mind. Change the energy. Change the energy. So I went for that walk and I changed the energy, and I kept calling it, you know what? Fine. We're in the third quarter. We're in the third quarter. We're in the third quarter. And I just kept going and going. And finally I came back and I go, you're going to figure this out. It's all right. My PET scan comes back a few hours after that, and the lung tumor decreased 30%. It had not moved. It had not moved in 9 months. Literally the same measurement for 9 months, and then all of a sudden it's 30%. And so, like, that's a wild experience to have, because, like, I knew that I had to work on my mind, and I was rewarded with something, luckily. And the best part about it, the doctor goes, we have no idea why I would do that. And I go, I have an idea, but I'm not going to talk to you about that right yet. So that was the thought I had, meaning you have to prepare the mind for the inevitable adversity, right? It's going to come. It's going to come for everybody. So to follow up on what's it like with my wife? Like, look, caretaking is hard. Caretakers don't get enough credit. They just don't. And I wish caretakers did get a lot more credit, because it is not easy. Lucky for her, there's no physical things with me, meaning, like, I'm still active. I CrossFit, I surf, all that shit. It's the mental and emotional side that's the problem. And so when I go south, she has to carry that, and she has to basically take her glass of water and fill mine so that we have something to work with. And finally, when I'm back up in that glass of water, she's now depleted. And now it's a reverse. I've got to, she's exhausted. The relationship is, we're lucky. It's the relationship is stronger than ever, right? Because of that. Because you're in it together, and I'm lucky that I have a partner that is, in sickness and in health. Like, we actually follow through, I guess.
Yes.
So it's better. It's better, and now everything we do every day is a shared vision on, like, all right, sure, healing is good. Healing is important. I keep telling people, cancer is not the content here. Cancer is not the content. It was just the messenger for everything else. And so now we have a mission together to change the way people live, basically save lives, remove from the stress. Basically the same things I keep saying: metabolically elite, physically elite, mentally elite. I have to do it to live, but if we can document that as a team, it'll help people regardless of where they're at in life, and to prepare for when an inevitable adversity comes, regardless of what that adversity is.
Love it. It's always preparing for the stuff that's upcoming, and especially it's the seasons of life, as Jim Rohn always spoke about. Many people could be in, or have had, been in summer up until this point, but if you're not preparing for a winter, and it's not about always having this negative idea of how life's going to work, it's just understanding how life works. Like, there's got to be ups, there's got to be downs, and you need to prepare for that. How are you going to respond? One thing, with the work that I do, we try to do a couple of tough challenges every year. And last year I did 30 marathons in 30 days, and I did 12-hour walk, right, with the group of lads. And the hardest one was the 12-hour walk. Like, you wouldn't expect it to be hard. It doesn't sound that hard. But doing it from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. and because it's such a long period of time to be in your head.
Yeah. You did it overnight?
Yeah, overnight.
Well, that's why. Yeah, that's super hard.
Yeah.
Sleep deprived.
But it was brutal. But the next morning, so of the 20 odd that started, I think 4 of us finished. But everyone had, regardless of what point they withdrew, they all had their moments where they felt like they'd achieved something. They'd pushed themselves further. My hip's aching, my foot's aching. Mentally, for me, I was worried about missing sleep because I'm so focused on sleep. Mm-hmm. But you just have these breakthroughs, and you now understand that the limit that you had put on yourself has changed. And when you do it with people, you've got this connection with people that it's very hard to get in everyday life, because you suffer together. When you suffer together, Man, the outcomes are phenomenal.
I mean, we literally did a podcast episode on that, my brother and I, like
Oh, really?
basically making friends after 30, right? Like
I did a
that's
podcast
essentially.
on that like 2 weeks ago.
Did you? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly it. Like
Yeah.
you don't make friends boozing.
No.
You use inhibition. It's actually going through a hard thing together because now you have that moment to connect you, and it's always there for the rest of your life, and you can talk back on it. JD, who came with us on this show, he'd never been outside of a Florida gated community like that. He's never left the states, and then we take him to Nepal and the Himalayas and northern India. You know, that's a mind boggling experience, and it was hard. And now all of a sudden, like JD and our cameraman like play chess together almost every day, and it's purely because we went through this thing together. You know.
Yep. That's awesome. And it's been, I guess, as well what you're doing, creating those moments for people. But I think from my experience, even when I wanted to run my first marathon, it's like you have to wait till that's on, or you can just create your own marathon. I did that because it's like, okay, I understand why I personally want to do it. Externally, it's nice to get the medal, be a part of that environment, but if you're doing it for a different reason, don't just wait for people to create things for you. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
take responsibility and take ownership and get things done.
Totally.
But Chad, I want to respect your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for those who, there's so much more they can find out about what's going on in your world and everything like that. But the beautiful thing is you're documenting this journey. Where can people follow you?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the first thing: being a well trained marketer, right? I want you to go to my website, chadvanags.com, and sign up for the newsletter. That's the first thing I want you to do, right? Because there I document everything. Right now, it's just been updates on everything. I'm going to start moving towards the metabolic, the physical, and the mental how to, if you will, right? Like I need to move to the how. Right now, it's just been me documenting like what's been going on. Now I'm going to say, here's my blood work. Here's my results. Here's the food that I'm now using. Here's the physical components to build muscle. Here's now the mental side, right? So go to chadvanags.com, sign up for the newsletter. That's where you're going to get the most information. The second thing is just go to Instagram. If you're on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn because I document it there, and Instagram. Instagram is where I'm doing all these videos. I try to do them daily, but it obviously is a lot of work. But that's where I document this entire process.
Awesome. And all the links can be found in the show notes below. So whichever platform you're listening on, make sure you head down and click to follow along. And if you've gotten value from this episode, make sure you definitely share it with those you feel will gain value from it and leave a 5-star rating and review. Chad, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Understanding how valuable your time is. I really appreciate that I got to share an hour with you and learn what it's like to, or learn a little bit more of what it's like to understand what life's really about.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on. Cheers, my man.